The 7 names fell from his mouth like stones into still water, and Faye Calloway understood that every one of them meant death. Crossing of the White Bridge, where the river runs through limestone gorges. King Yaroslav Gravori stood before a map table carved from a single piece of obsidian, his white hair pulled back with silver cord, pale fingers tracing the borderlands between his northern realm and the territories held by Queen Seraphine's court in the south. Last spring, a merchant family tried to pass with forged papers. The bridge keepers drowned them in the rapids below. No bodies recovered. Faye folded another blouse into her traveling bag, the fabric rough under her palms. The palace chamber assigned to her was larger than the entire apartment she'd shared with her sister back in the human quarter of the capital, all stone and silk and candlelight that never seemed to flicker. She had been here 3 months, translating testimony from the 400 human wards trapped in Queen Seraphine's southern hall, building the legal case for their release. Now the moment had come to deliver that testimony in person, because no proxy would satisfy the ancient compact between the vampire courts. Harrogate, the old military pass, Yaroslav continued. His voice carried the particular clarity of someone who had lived 1,000 years and grown accustomed to being heard. 60 years ago they built pyres on both sides. Anyone attempting passage is burned for sport. The garrison considers it a festival twice a year. "I'm still going," Faye said quietly. Yaroslav's hand stilled on the map. He turned to look at her, and even after 3 months of working in close quarters, the full weight of his attention still felt like standing in a winter gale. His eyes were the color of mercury, reflective and strange, set in a face that would have been beautiful if it weren't so clearly other. All the old vampires looked like that, white-skinned, white-haired, as though they'd been carved from moonlight and given breath. "Silverpike Crossing," he said, watching her pack. "Appears safe. A ferryman takes coin and provides passage. What the travelers don't know is that he sells their names and destinations to slavers on both sides. By the time you realize the trap, you're already in chains headed east." Faye tucked her translation notes into a leather folder, the pages covered in her careful handwriting. Testimony from children who hadn't seen their parents in decades. Testimony from women who'd been taken as tithe and never released. Testimony from men who'd learned to speak 3 languages in captivity because it was the only power they could claim. "The Thornwood Road," Yaroslav said, "runs through forest held by neither court. Bandits take everything, kill most travelers, keep some for ransom that never comes." "I heard you the first time you explained this," Faye said, 2 weeks ago. "Deepwater Ford, where the river runs slow and black." His voice had taken on a rhythm now, almost like a song, and Faye realized he was reciting something very old. "The water itself is claimed by the court of Lady Nyx, who has her own laws. She takes 1 traveler in 10. No one knows what happens to them. 400 people are waiting for me to appear before Queen Seraphine and swear this testimony into record," Faye said. She closed her bag and turned to face him fully. "If I don't go, the case collapses. The compact requires in-person testimony for matters involving more than 100 souls. The Blood Summit, highest point in the mountain range." Yaroslav's hands were very still now, resting on the map's edge. "Held by a minor lord named Cassius, who has declared himself independent of all courts. He kills everyone who crosses, vampire and human alike, because he believes isolation is the only true sovereignty." 7 crossings, Faye said. "And I need to pass through all of them to reach Queen Seraphine's hall." "Yes." "And no one has crossed enemy lands alive in how long?" 43 years, Yaroslav said. "A vampire messenger made it through in 1983, but she had safe conduct signed by all parties and still lost an arm at Harrogate." Faye picked up her bag. It wasn't heavy. She'd learned to travel light during her years as an interpreter, moving between human settlements and vampire territories, building the language skills that had eventually brought her to the king's attention. "Then I suppose I'll be the first in a long time." "No," Yaroslav said. The single word carried absolute finality. "You will not go alone. Your Majesty, you've explained repeatedly that you can't provide an armed escort without violating the treaties. If you send soldiers, Queen Seraphine will consider it an act of war." I will not send soldiers. Yaroslav stepped away from the map table. In the candlelight, his white hair seemed to glow. He wore black as always, perfectly tailored, with silver fasteners that looked like small weapons. I will walk you through every border myself. Faye stared at him. You can't do that. I am the king of the Northern Territories, holding compact with 15 lesser courts and alliance with the Eastern Mountain Lords. I can do precisely as I wish. It will insult Queen Seraphine. Yes, and the independent territories, almost certainly, and probably several of your own allied courts who will see it as beneath your dignity to personally escort a human translator. Yaroslav's mouth curved, not quite a smile. I look forward to their outrage. Why? Faye asked. The question came out softer than she intended. Why would you risk that kind of political disaster? He was quiet for a long moment, and in that silence, Faye became aware of the sounds beyond the chamber. The distant footfalls of palace guards, the whisper of wind through stone corridors, the eternal stillness that filled spaces where vampires lived. They didn't breathe the way humans didn't make the small unconscious noises that filled human buildings. Everything was deliberate, controlled. Because you are attempting to free 400 humans from unlawful captivity, Yaroslav said finally. Because you have worked for 3 months without payment, sleeping 4 hours a night, translating testimony that made you weep. Because the law should mean something, and if it means anything at all, it means those 400 people deserve to go home. He picked up his own travel cloak from a chair, black wool lined with silver thread. And because no one should have to walk through those 7 hells alone. Faye's throat felt tight. She'd spent her whole life navigating the edges of vampire society, learning to be useful enough to keep, quiet enough not to offend, skilled enough to survive. Kindness from a vampire king had not been part of her calculations. When do we leave? She asked. Dawn, Yaroslav said. We'll time our travel to make the most dangerous crossings during daylight hours. Even I have limits. You'll be weakened. Yes. Your enemies will know that. Let them. Yaroslav fastened his cloak with a silver pin shaped like a wolf's head. I have been king for 800 years, Miss Calloway. I did not survive this long by being predictable. They left as the first light broke over the palace walls, slipping out through a side gate that opened onto a cobblestone road leading north into farmland before it curved south and east toward the contested borders. Yaroslav had a horse, a massive black creature with intelligent eyes, but he walked beside Faye rather than riding. The sun was a pale disk behind morning clouds, and she noticed he kept to the shadowed side of the road. Tell me about the wards, he said after an hour of silence. Not the testimony. Tell me about them as people. Faye adjusted the strap of her bag. Why? Because I'm going to argue for their release in front of Queen Seraphine's court, and I'd like to know who I'm fighting for. I thought I was the one delivering the testimony. You'll swear the record, Yaroslav said. But I guarantee Seraphine will challenge it. She'll claim the wards were lawfully taken, that they're well treated, that release would violate agreements older than your great-grandmother. If we're going to win, I need to make her court see them as individuals, not numbers in a compact. So Faye told him. She described Maria, 67 years old, who'd been taken as tithe when she was 19 and hadn't seen her family since. She spoke about Thomas and James, brothers separated 40 years ago and held in different wings of Seraphine's hall, who'd managed to smuggle letters to each other using a kitchen worker as intermediary. She explained how little Rosie, only 8, had been born in captivity because her mother was a ward, and how the child had never seen daylight without bars across the windows. Yaroslav listened without interrupting, and Faye found herself talking more freely than she had in months. Something about walking this road together, moving toward danger with purpose, loosened the careful control she usually maintained. The worst part, she said as they crested a hill that gave view to a river valley below, is that most of them don't even remember what they did to be taken. The tithe system is so old, so embedded, that sometimes great-great-grandchildren are still paying for an ancestor's debt. The tithe laws were meant for criminals, Yaroslav said quietly. Somewhere along the way, they became about power, about keeping a supply of human servants and blood donors without having to negotiate for them. Can you change that? The laws, I mean. Not alone. It would require agreement among all the major courts, and most of them profit from the current system. He glanced at her, mercury eyes catching the light. But I can start by freeing these 400. Precedent matters. They reached the first crossing just before noon. The white bridge spanned a gorge where water rushed over limestone rocks far below, the sound a constant roar that made conversation difficult. The bridge itself was narrow, barely wide enough for 2 people to pass, built from white stone that gleamed in the sun. A guard station sat at the northern end, a small fortified tower with archer slits. As Faye and Yaroslav approached, 3 vampires emerged. They wore the silver and blue livery of the Border Watch, and their faces went carefully blank when they saw Yaroslav. "Your Majesty," the lead guard said. He was young by vampire standards, probably not more than 200 years old. "We were not informed of a royal inspection." "This is not an inspection," Yaroslav said. "I am escorting Miss Calloway to the Southern Territories. We require passage." The guard's eyes flicked to Faye, then back to Yaroslav. "My lord, this crossing is closed to human traffic. It has been for 6 years. Then it is now open. Your Majesty, I don't have the authority to—" "You have my authority," Yaroslav said. His voice hadn't risen, but something in it made the air feel colder. "I am the king. I am telling you to open the crossing." The young guard looked genuinely distressed. "Lord Mikhail will have my commission if I disobey his standing orders." "Lord Mikhail reports to me," Yaroslav said. "If he takes issue with your obedience to your king, tell him to bring his complaints to the palace personally." They stood in silence for a moment, and Faye could see the guard calculating. Finally, he stepped aside. The bridge swayed slightly as they walked across. Faye kept her eyes forward, trying not to think about the merchant family who'd been thrown into the gorge. Yaroslav walked beside her, one hand resting lightly on her lower back, steadying her against the wind that whipped through the canyon. "1 down," he said when they reached the southern side. 6 to go. The southern end of the White Bridge opened onto neutral territory, a strip of land claimed by neither Yaroslav's court nor Seraphine's. They followed a dirt road through scattered villages where humans and vampires lived in uneasy proximity, farming and trading with the wariness of people who knew peace was temporary. They stopped at an inn as sunset approached. Yaroslav had been growing quieter as the day lengthened, and Faye noticed he moved with more energy once the sun dropped below the horizon. 2 rooms, Yaroslav told the innkeeper, a middle-aged human woman with flour on her hands. "I only have 1 available," the woman said apologetically. "There's a harvest festival, and we're fuller than usual." "We'll take it," Faye said before Yaroslav could argue. "It's fine." The room was small but clean, with 2 beds separated by a washstand. Yaroslav stood in the doorway for a moment, clearly uncomfortable, before finally entering. "I can sleep in the common room," he said. "Don't be ridiculous. You need rest before tomorrow." Faye set her bag on the bed nearest the window. "We're both adults. You're human. I'm a vampire. Propriety suggests—" "Propriety can wait until after we've survived 7 deadly border crossings," Faye said. She started unpacking her night things, deliberately casual. "Besides, I trust you." Yaroslav went very still. "You shouldn't." "Why not?" "Because I am old and powerful, and I've killed more people than you could count in a lifetime," he said quietly. "Because trust is a luxury humans can't afford with my kind." Faye turned to look at him. He stood in the center of the small room, too tall, too pale, too otherworldly for the humble space. And yet there was something almost vulnerable in the way he held himself. "You've had 3 months to hurt me," she said. "You've had every opportunity. Instead, you paid for my sister's medical care when she got sick. You made sure I had proper quarters and meals. You listened to hours of testimony that made me cry, and you never once suggested I should be less emotional or more professional." She sat on the edge of her bed. "So yes, I trust you. Maybe I'm a fool, but I trust you." Yaroslav was silent for a long moment. Then he inclined his head slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement, and moved to the other bed. They fell into an easy routine. Faye washed up while Yaroslav stood at the window, looking out at the village below. When she was ready for sleep, he pulled a book from his travel pack and read by candlelight, turning pages so quietly she could barely hear. "Can I ask you something?" Faye said into the darkness. "Of course. Why did you really decide to do this? Not the political reasons, the real reason." The silence stretched so long she thought he might not answer. Finally, his voice came through the dark, softer than she'd ever heard it. "Because I have been king for 800 years, he said, "and I have made every decision based on strategy and politics and power. I have sacrificed and compromised and calculated until I sometimes cannot remember what it feels like to simply do the right thing because it is right." He paused. "You reminded me. When you came to my court with your testimony and your determination to free people you'd never met, simply because it was just, you reminded me why I wanted to be king in the first place, not for power, for this, to make the world slightly less cruel." Faye's chest felt tight. "I'm glad I could remind you." "So am I," Yaroslav said quietly. "Sleep well, Faye." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and the sound of it in his ancient, careful voice followed her down into sleep. The second crossing was Harrow Gate, and they reached it 2 days later after traveling through increasingly hostile territory. The road grew rougher, the villages more sparse, until finally they stood before a military pass carved through solid rock. Pyres stood on both sides of the pass, massive structures built from iron and stone, stained black with old burning. A garrison of vampires manned the crossing, wearing armor that looked medieval, all plate and chain. Their commander was a female vampire named Katerina, with scars across her face and arms that spoke of centuries of combat. She looked at Yaroslav with open contempt. "Well," she said, "the king himself, gracing us with his presence." "Commander Katerina," Yaroslav said evenly, "we require passage south." "No, this is not a request. And I am not your subject," Katerina said. She gestured to the pyres. "This pass is held by independent garrison, funded by Lord Cassius and the Thornwood clans. We answer to no one, and we burn everyone who tries to cross. That is our law." "Your law is barbarism," Yaroslav said. "Your law is weakness," Katerina countered. "You sit in your northern palace making treaties and compacts while the world tears itself apart. We maintain order the only way that works, through fear." Faye stepped forward before she could think better of it. "How many people have you burned?" Katerina's scarred face turned toward her. "I stopped counting at 1,000. "Were they all criminals? All threats?" "They were all trespassers." "Children?" Faye asked. "Families? Merchants just trying to trade?" "Everyone," Katerina said flatly. "We do not discriminate." "You must be very proud," Faye said, and the sarcasm in her voice was sharp enough to draw blood. Katerina moved faster than human eyes could track, suddenly inches from Faye, close enough that Faye could see the flecks of gold in her dark eyes. "Careful, little human." Yaroslav was there between them in the space of a heartbeat, not touching Katerina, but positioned in a way that made his threat clear. "You will step back," he said quietly, "or I will break every bone in your body and leave you for the sun." "You can't kill me," Katerina said. "I'm protected under Cassius's compact." "Cassius is a coward who hides in his mountain fortress," Yaroslav said, "and compacts mean nothing to the dead." They stood frozen in that tableau for a long moment. Then Katerina laughed, a harsh sound like breaking glass. "I'd forgotten what you're like when provoked. It's been too long since you left your palace." "Let us pass," Yaroslav said. "Give me a reason." "Because I am asking," Yaroslav said. "And because somewhere under all that armor and violence you remember what it was like to believe in something other than fear." Katerina stared at him. Something flickered across her scarred face, too quick to read. Then she stepped back and gestured to her garrison. "Light the pyres," she said. The soldiers moved immediately, and flames roared to life on both sides of the pass. Heat washed over them in waves, and Faye could feel sweat breaking out on her skin. "You have until the fires burn down," Katerina said. If you're not through by then, you burn with them. Yaroslav took Faye's hand, and they ran. The pass was longer than it had looked from outside, and the fires made the air shimmer and dance. Smoke filled Faye's lungs, and her eyes watered. Beside her, Yaroslav was breathing hard, weakened by the daylight and now the flames, but he never let go of her hand. They burst out the southern end just as the fires reached their peak, collapsing onto grass that felt impossibly cool and soft after the heat of the pass. Faye rolled onto her back, gasping, and found Yaroslav beside her, his white hair singed at the ends, his pale skin reddened from heat. That was insane, Faye managed. But effective, Yaroslav said. He was breathing hard, and Faye realized with a start that it was one of the few times she'd seen him look genuinely winded. 2 down. Are you all right? I will be. He sat up slowly. That was well done, by the way. What was? Challenging Katerina, reminding her of her own brutality. Yaroslav looked at her, and there was something warm in his mercury eyes. She expected me to argue politics or power. You argued morality, and it caught her off balance. I just said what I was thinking. Exactly, Yaroslav said softly. You see the world as it should be, not as it is. It's remarkable. Faye felt heat in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the fires. We should keep moving. They traveled for 3 more days through neutral lands, and Faye noticed that something had shifted between them. Yaroslav walked closer to her now, their hands sometimes brushing. He asked questions about her life, her family, her dreams, and actually listened to the answers with the kind of attention that made her feel like the only person in the world. She learned that he had been human once, turned during a plague 800 years ago, that he still remembered the taste of apples and the sound of his mother's voice. She learned that he hated what vampire society had become, how the old codes of honor had twisted into justifications for cruelty, but he stayed in power because he believed he could make it better from within. Do you ever regret it? Faye asked one evening as they sat by a campfire under stars that seemed impossibly bright. Becoming king? Every day, Yaroslav said. He was feeding small sticks into the flames, watching them catch and burn. And never. It's both at once. That doesn't make sense. Most true things don't. He glanced at her. Do you regret becoming an interpreter, choosing work that puts you in constant danger? Every day, Faye said quietly. And never. Yaroslav's laugh was surprised and genuine. We're both fools then. The best kind, Faye said. And when he smiled at her, she felt something warm and dangerous bloom in her chest. The 3rd crossing was Silverpike, and they arrived at the ferry just after dawn. The ferryman was a stooped vampire who looked ancient even by their standards, his white hair wispy and thin, his hands gnarled. Passage for 2, Yaroslav said, offering silver coins. The ferryman counted them slowly, then nodded. Get in. The boat was small and rickety, barely large enough for both of them. They sat close together as the ferryman pushed off from the shore, working a long pole through shallow water before the current caught them. This is too easy, Yaroslav murmured. Maybe we're due for some good luck, Faye said. But halfway across the river she noticed another boat pulling alongside them. Then another. Within minutes they were surrounded by 4 boats full of armed vampires, their faces hard and calculating. Well, well, one of them said. The ferryman came through again. The old ferryman was counting more coins, these ones handed over by the newcomers. Always do, he said placidly. Easiest hunting in the territory. Yaroslav stood up smoothly, rocking the boat. You're making a mistake. You're a long way from your palace, old king, the leader of the slavers said. He was young and cocky, probably only a century old. And you look tired. Been traveling by daylight, have you? Leave now, Yaroslav said quietly, and I'll forget this happened. The slaver laughed. There are 12 of us and 1 of you, and that human will fetch a good price in the eastern markets. Final warning, Yaroslav said. They attacked all at once, and Faye watched in frozen awe as Yaroslav moved. Even weakened by daylight, even outnumbered, he was extraordinary. He fought with the efficiency of someone who had been doing this for 800 years, every movement precise and devastating. He broke bones and tore weapons away and threw vampires into the river with what looked like casual effort. But there were 12 of them, and they were fresh and strong. Faye saw Yaroslav take a blade across his ribs, saw him stumble as another slaver grabbed him from behind. Without thinking, she grabbed the ferryman's pole and swung it hard, cracking the vampire holding Yaroslav across the skull. He went down, and Yaroslav used the opening to break free. Within minutes, the fight was over. Half the slavers were in the river, swimming for shore. The other half were unconscious in their boats. The ferryman had disappeared entirely, probably fled the moment the fighting started. Yaroslav stood in the center of their small boat, breathing hard, bleeding from the wound in his ribs. "You shouldn't have done that." "You're welcome," Faye said. "You could have been killed." "So could you." She ripped a strip from her shirt and pressed it against his bleeding side. "Hold this." He did, staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You continue to surprise me." "Good," Faye said. "You'd be bored otherwise." They finished the crossing in silence, abandoning the boat on the southern shore and walking inland. Yaroslav's wound healed as darkness fell, his vampire nature knitting the flesh back together, but Faye noticed he stayed close to her for the rest of the evening. That night they stopped at another inn, and again there was only one room available. This time, Yaroslav didn't protest. They fell asleep in their separate beds, but Faye woke in the deepest part of the night to find him standing at the window, silhouetted against moonlight. "Can't sleep?" she asked quietly. "I keep thinking about what could have gone wrong today," he said without turning. "If they'd grabbed you before I could react, if you'd fallen in the river, if that blade had found you instead of me." Faye got up and went to stand beside him. But none of that happened. This time. He finally looked at her, and his mercury eyes were bright in the darkness. "Faye, there are 4 more crossings ahead. Each one is worse than the last. I need you to understand what you've walked into." "I understood from the beginning." "No," Yaroslav said softly. "You understood intellectually, but now you've seen what these crossings really mean. Violence and betrayal and death. And it's only going to get harder. Are you trying to convince me to turn back? I'm trying to give you the choice." Faye was quiet for a moment, looking out at the moonlit landscape. "Those 400 people don't have a choice. They're trapped in Queen Seraphine's hall, waiting for someone to free them. If I turn back now, they stay trapped. You could send the testimony with me. I could deliver it on your behalf. The compact requires in-person testimony from the one who collected it," Faye said. "You know that. Compacts can be challenged, laws can be bent. Not by you," Faye said, turning to face him fully. "You're the one who taught me that precedent matters. If you break the rules to protect me, you undermine everything you're trying to build." Yaroslav's hand came up to cup her face, his pale fingers gentle against her skin. "When did you become so wise?" "I learned from a very stubborn vampire king," Faye said, and then she was kissing him. It was soft and careful and tentative, the kind of first kiss that asks questions instead of demanding answers. Yaroslav made a sound low in his throat and pulled her closer, and Faye felt 800 years of loneliness in the way he held her, as though she might disappear if he let go. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Yaroslav rested his forehead against hers. "This is unwise." "Probably," Faye agreed. "You're human. I'm vampire. There are 1,000 reasons this cannot work." "Name one that matters," Faye said. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he kissed her again, deeper this time, and Faye stopped thinking about reasons or logic or consequences. There was only this, his hands in her hair, his mouth on hers, the feeling of something bright and fragile taking root between them. They didn't sleep together that night, not in the full sense, but they lay in Yaroslav's bed, wrapped around each other, and Faye felt safer than she had in years. The 4th crossing was the Thornwood Road, and they entered the forest just after noon. The trees grew thick and dark. their branches woven so tightly overhead that barely any sunlight penetrated. It felt like walking through twilight even in the middle of the day. "Stay close," Yaroslav said. He'd been tense since they entered the woods, his hand resting on a blade he'd acquired at the last village. "How far is it through?" 6 hours on foot if we're not delayed." They'd been walking for 3 hours when the bandits found them. They came from all directions at once, humans and vampires both, armed with everything from swords to modern rifles. Their leader was a tall vampire with one eye, the other socket covered by a leather patch. "Well, this is interesting," the bandit leader said. "We were expecting merchants or refugees. Didn't realize we'd catch a king." "Let us pass," Yaroslav said. "We want no trouble." "Unfortunately, trouble is our primary business." The leader gestured to his crew. "And you, Your Majesty, represent a significant payday. I'm sure your court would pay handsomely for your safe return." "I'm sure they wouldn't," Yaroslav said dryly. "Half of them would prefer I stay missing." The bandit laughed. "Fair point. Then we'll settle for your coin and whatever valuables you're carrying." "No," Yaroslav said simply. "No?" The bandit's smile faded. "You understand you're surrounded, yes? We have rifles, crossbows, and more than enough people to take you down even in peak condition. And you, my lord, look like you've been traveling hard by daylight. You're weak." "I am never weak enough to surrender to bandits," Yaroslav said. Faye stepped forward. "What if we offer you something better than robbery?" The bandit leader's single eye fixed on her. "The human speaks. How charming." "I'm an interpreter and legal scholar," Faye said, keeping her voice steady despite the rifles pointed at her chest. "I've spent 3 months building a case to free 400 human wards from unlawful captivity. If we succeed, it will set a precedent that could change the entire tithe system." "And why should I care about human wards?" "Because half your crew is human," Faye said, gesturing to the bandits around them. "And I'm guessing most of them ended up here because the legal system failed them, because they were taken as tithe, or their families were, and they had no recourse. If we can break the tithe system, we break the cycle that creates outlaws in the first place." The bandit leader was silent for a long moment. Then he started laughing, a genuine sound of surprised delight. "You've got courage, girl. Terrible survival instincts, but courage." He lowered his weapon. "Tell you what, you can pass freely if you promise me one thing." "What?" "When you break that system, you come back here and tell me about it personally," he said. "I want to know if it's possible to actually change things, or if we're all just playing at rebellion while the world stays exactly the same." "I promise," Faye said. "Good enough." He waved his bandits back. "Let them through." They walked in silence for another hour after that, until the trees finally began to thin and late afternoon light broke through the canopy. Only then did Yaroslav speak. "You're extraordinary," he said quietly. "I just talked to them." "You saw them as people instead of threats," Yaroslav said. "You offered them hope instead of violence. That's not just talking. That's gift." Faye felt warmth spread through her chest. "You would have fought them all to protect me, wouldn't you?" "Without hesitation. Even though it might have killed you." "Faye," Yaroslav said, stopping to face her fully. "I have lived for 800 years. I have seen empires rise and fall, watched friends turn to dust, survived wars and plagues and political intrigue that would fill libraries, and in all that time, I have never felt about anyone the way I feel about you." He took her hands. "So yes, I would fight an army of bandits. I would walk through fire. I would do whatever it takes to keep you safe, because you have become precious to me in a way I didn't think was still possible." Faye's throat felt tight. "I love you." The words came out simple and true, and Yaroslav's eyes went wide. "You shouldn't. Too late. I'm a monster, Faye. I've killed people. I've made terrible choices. I will outlive you by centuries unless you turn me," Faye said quietly. "Is that what you were going to say?" Yaroslav looked stricken. "I would never ask that of you." "What if I wanted it?" "You don't know what you're saying." Yes, I do, Faye said. I'm saying that I love you, and I want a future with you, whatever that looks like. I'm saying that I'd rather have eternity with you than a normal human life without you. She squeezed his hands. But that's a conversation for after we finish this journey. Right now we have 3 more crossings to survive. Yaroslav pulled her into a kiss that tasted like relief and longing and desperate hope. When they broke apart, he was smiling, and it transformed his face into something radiant. 3 more crossings, he agreed. And then we discuss forever. They emerged from the thornwood just before sunset and stopped at a village to rest. But that night, as they lay together in another small inn room, Faye noticed Yaroslav seemed distracted. "What's wrong?" she asked. "I've been thinking about the remaining crossings," he said. "Deepwater Ford, the Blood Summit, and then the final entry into Queen Seraphine's territory. Each one is controlled by a different power, and we've been fortunate so far, but our luck will run out." "You sound like you're expecting something specific." Yaroslav was quiet for a moment. "The safe conduct documents I'm carrying were provided by Lord Victor, one of my oldest allies. He assured me they would grant us passage through neutral territories. But Victor has been strangely insistent about this journey. He encouraged me to escort you personally, provided the documents without my asking, even suggested the route we're taking." Yaroslav sat up, running a hand through his white hair. "At the time I thought he was being supportive. Now I'm wondering if there's another motive." "You think he wants you killed?" "I think he might want me away from the capital and vulnerable," Yaroslav said. "There are factions in my court who would prefer a different king. Victor has always seemed loyal, but 800 years of politics has taught me that loyalty is often just ambition, waiting for the right moment." Faye felt cold fear settle in her stomach. "What do we do?" "We continue forward," Yaroslav said, "but carefully, and we trust no one's word except our own." The 5th crossing was Deepwater Ford, and they reached it on a gray morning with rain threatening. The river was exactly as Yaroslav had described, slow-moving, wide, and black as ink. A single dock extended into the water, and a female vampire sat at the end, dangling her pale feet in the current. She looked up as they approached, and Faye saw that her eyes were completely black, pupil and iris both. "Lady Nyx," Yaroslav said, inclining his head respectfully. "Yaroslav Gravori." Her voice sounded like water over stones. "It's been a century since you visited my ford. I require passage for myself and my companion." "I know." Lady Nyx stood, and Faye saw that she wore a dress that seemed to be made of the river itself, black water that flowed and rippled. "The question is what you're willing to pay. Name your price." "1 traveler in 10, Nyx said. "That is the law of this ford. You are 2 travelers. Not quite 10, but not quite 1 either. So I will offer you a choice." She gestured to the water. "One of you may cross freely. The other must give me something precious." "What do you mean by precious?" Faye asked, those black eyes fixed on her. "A memory. A secret. A piece of your soul. Something that makes you who you are." Nyx walked closer, her water dress leaving wet footprints on the dock. "I collect such things. They're far more interesting than bodies." "Take from me," Yaroslav said immediately. "No," Nyx said. "The human fascinates me more. She has walked through 4 deadly crossings with a vampire king and lived. She has changed laws and moved hearts. What makes such a creature tick, I wonder?" Faye felt ice in her veins. "And if I refuse?" "Then you both stay here forever," Nyx said pleasantly. "The river claims all who will not pay." Yaroslav stepped between them. "You cannot have her." "Then I have you both." Nyx settled back down on the dock, feet in the water. "I can wait." Faye put a hand on Yaroslav's arm. "It's all right." "Faye, you don't know what you're giving up. A memory, a secret. These things shape us. Losing them could change who you are fundamentally." "I know," Faye said. She looked at Lady Nyx. "But those 400 people are worth it. Take what you need." Nyx smiled, and it was a beautiful, terrible thing. "Come here, brave girl." Faye walked to the edge of the dock and knelt. Nyx placed both hands on her temples, and Faye felt something pull inside her mind, like a thread being drawn from fabric. Ah, Nyx breathed. Yes, this is lovely. The world went white and strange, and when Faye came back to herself, she was lying on the dock with Yaroslav holding her. His face was stricken with worry. "What did you take?" he demanded of Nyx. "Her memory of her mother's voice," Nyx said softly. "She died when the girl was young, and that voice was one of her most treasured possessions. Now it's mine." Faye felt the absence like a hole in her chest. She could remember her mother, remember her face and her hands and the way she smelled like lavender, but the sound of her voice was just gone. Not forgotten, actually removed, like a photograph torn from an album. "You may cross," Nyx said, gesturing to the far shore. The black water between them suddenly had a path of stones, appearing just beneath the surface. Yaroslav helped Faye to her feet, and they crossed in silence. On the far shore, Faye finally let herself cry, and Yaroslav held her while she grieved for something she could no longer even remember properly. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "This is my fault. I should never have brought you on this journey." "Stop," Faye said. "I chose this. I knew it would be dangerous. Not like this. Not taking pieces of you away." Faye wiped her eyes and looked at him. "I still have everything that matters. I have my purpose. I have you. And I have 3 more crossings to survive." They traveled for 2 more days, and Faye noticed that Yaroslav was increasingly quiet. He watched her constantly, as though afraid she might disappear, and at night he held her like she was made of glass. On the evening before they reached the Blood Summit, they stopped at a village, and Yaroslav went to negotiate for rooms while Faye waited outside. A messenger approached, a young vampire wearing travel-stained clothes. "Miss Calloway?" he asked. "Yes." "I bring word from Lord Victor in the northern capital." He handed her a sealed letter. "He asked me to deliver this personally." Faye broke the seal and read. The letter was short and direct. "The safe conduct documents are forgeries. Queen Seraphine knows you're coming and has prepared a trap at the Blood Summit. Lord Cassius has been paid to kill King Yaroslav and capture you. Turn back now, or both of you will die." Faye's hands shook. "When did you leave the capital?" 6 days ago. I've been riding hard to catch you." Yaroslav emerged from the inn and saw them talking. His expression went carefully neutral. "What's this?" Faye handed him the letter. She watched his face as he read, saw the moment comprehension and betrayal hit. "Victor," he said quietly. "Of course. He's been positioning himself as my successor for decades. If I die out here, far from the capital, he can claim the throne and blame it on the dangers of the borderlands." "We need to go back," Faye said. "We can't." Yaroslav handed the letter back. "If we turn around now, those 400 wards stay trapped. The testimony goes undelivered. Everything we've sacrificed means nothing. If we go forward, you'll be killed." "Perhaps," Yaroslav said. "Or perhaps we'll find another way through." He looked at the messenger. "Did Victor send you to warn us or to confirm we received his trap?" The messenger's eyes widened. He said to warn you. Did he tell you what was in the letter before he sealed it?" "No, Your Majesty." "Then you're an innocent messenger and you may go," Yaroslav said. "But tell Victor that his trap has failed, and when I return to the capital, we will have words about loyalty." The messenger fled, and Yaroslav turned to Faye. "We need to think this through carefully." They sat in their room that night, spreading out the maps and documents. The Blood Summit was the 6th crossing, held by Lord Cassius, who styled himself independent of all courts. According to Victor's letter, Cassius had been paid to kill Yaroslav. "What if we avoid the Blood Summit entirely?" Faye asked. "Go around it?" "The detour would add 2 weeks to our journey," Yaroslav said. "And by the terms of the compact, you must appear before Queen Seraphine within 30 days of setting out, or the testimony becomes invalid. We're on day 22. So we have 8 days to cross the summit and reach Seraphine's hall." "Yes." Faye studied the map. "What if we approach Cassius directly? Tell him we know about the trap?" He'll just kill us faster. Not if we offer him something better than whatever Victor paid. Yaroslav looked at her with something like awe. What could we possibly offer that would outweigh a fortune and the death of a king? Legitimacy, Faye said. Cassius styles himself independent, but no other court recognizes his authority. He's isolated, probably paranoid, definitely vulnerable. What if you offered to formally recognize his territory in exchange for safe passage? That would infuriate half my court. Your court is already plotting against you, Faye pointed out. At least this way you get something out of it. Yaroslav was quiet for a long time, thinking. Finally, he nodded. It could work. It's dangerous and audacious and will cause political chaos for years, but it could work. He pulled her into a fierce kiss. You are brilliant. I'm desperate, Faye said. There's a difference. They reached the Blood Summit the next afternoon. It was the highest point in the mountain range, a fortress built into the rock itself, with walls that looked like they'd been there since the world was young. Guards stopped them at the outer gate. State your business. I am King Yaroslav Gravori, Yaroslav said. I request an audience with Lord Cassius. The guards exchanged glances. Clearly they'd been expecting him, but perhaps not this direct approach. One disappeared inside, while the other watched them with undisguised suspicion. An hour later, they were brought into a great hall carved from the mountain. Lord Cassius sat on a throne of black stone, a vampire who looked older than Yaroslav, with white hair down to his waist and eyes like chips of ice. Well, Cassius said. The king walks into my trap of his own free will. That's disappointing. I expected more of a challenge. I know Victor paid you to kill me, Yaroslav said, and I'm here to offer you a better deal. Cassius leaned forward slightly. I'm listening. Formal recognition of your territory as an independent court, Yaroslav said. Full sovereignty, trade agreements, a seat at the Council of Courts. Everything you've wanted for the last 3 centuries. In exchange for? Safe passage for myself and Miss Calloway, and your testimony before the council that Victor conspired to have me killed. Cassius was silent for a long moment. Victor paid me in gold and promised me your head. That's tangible. What you're offering is politics and promises. What I'm offering is a future, Yaroslav said. Victor's gold will spend. My recognition will last forever. If you survive to deliver it. If I don't survive, then the entire compact system collapses, Yaroslav said, because I am the only king powerful enough to hold it together. Without me, the courts descend into war, and your little mountain fortress becomes a battleground. Is that really what you want? Cassius stood and walked down from his throne. He moved like a predator, all controlled grace and coiled violence. You're asking me to betray the person who hired me. I'm asking you to choose the winning side, Yaroslav said. Victor is attempting a coup. If he succeeds, he'll have you killed anyway because you're a witness to his treachery. If I survive and expose him, he's destroyed. Either way, your alliance with him has an expiration date. He paused. But an alliance with me could last centuries. Cassius studied him for a long moment. Then he started to laugh, a sound that echoed off the stone walls. You have audacity, Gravori. I'll give you that. He turned to Faye. And what about you, little human? What do you think of your king's proposal? I think Lord Victor made a mistake when he assumed you'd stay bought, Faye said. You've maintained independence for 300 years because you're smart and strategic, not because you're anyone's hired knife. This is your chance to formalize what you've already built. It would be foolish to throw that away for gold. She's clever, Cassius said to Yaroslav. Where did you find her? She found me, Yaroslav said, and changed everything. Cassius walked back to his throne and sat. I accept your offer, he said. Formal recognition, trade agreements, a seat at the council, and I will testify against Victor personally. And safe passage? Yaroslav asked. You're my guests, Cassius said. By the old laws, that makes you untouchable under my roof. He gestured to his guards. Prepare chambers for the king and his companion. They'll rest here tonight and continue south in the morning. That night, in rooms carved from the mountain itself, Yaroslav and Faye lay together in a bed piled with furs. The air was cold at this altitude, and they huddled close for warmth. 6 crossings, Faye whispered. We've survived 6. One more, Yaroslav said, and then Queen Seraphine herself. Are you worried? Terrified, he admitted. Seraphine has ruled the southern territories for 1,000 years. She's older than me, more powerful, and she has no reason to agree to release those wards. We have the law on our side. Seraphine makes her own laws, Yaroslav said, and according to Victor's letter, she knows we're coming. She'll have prepared something. Then we'll face it together, Faye said. She kissed him softly. Whatever happens. They left the Blood Summit at dawn, and Cassius himself walked them to the southern border of his territory. Good luck, he said. You'll need it. The 7th and final crossing was the border into Queen Seraphine's lands, and it was marked by an enormous gate set into a wall that stretched as far as the eye could see. Guards in crimson armor stood at attention, and as Yaroslav and Faye approached, a female vampire stepped forward. King Yaroslav Gravori and interpreter Faye Calloway, she said. Queen Seraphine has been expecting you. We seek audience with Her Majesty, Yaroslav said formally. Audience will be granted, the vampire said. But first, the price of passage. She unrolled a scroll and read, By order of Queen Seraphine, King Yaroslav Gravori may enter the southern territories only under oath of hospitality. He must present himself unarmed, as a guest in the Queen's hall, and submit to her laws while in her lands. Faye felt her blood run cold. An oath of hospitality was sacred among vampires, but it also meant complete vulnerability. Yaroslav would have to give up his weapons, his guards, his authority. He would be entirely at Seraphine's mercy. That is acceptable, Yaroslav said calmly. Your Majesty, no, Faye said. It's a trap. Of course it's a trap, Yaroslav said, but it's also the only way through. He turned to the guard. I accept the terms of hospitality. I will enter unarmed and submit to Queen Seraphine's laws. The guard gestured, and 2 more vampires stepped forward with a carved wooden box. Yaroslav removed his blade, a silver dagger he'd carried since the journey began, and placed it in the box. Then he removed several smaller knives, a set of steel rings from his fingers that Faye realized were weapons, and finally a chain from around his neck that looked innocuous but was probably deadly. Satisfied? He asked. The oath must be spoken, the guard said. Yaroslav stood tall, and Faye had never seen him look more regal or more vulnerable. I, Yaroslav Gravori, King of the Northern Territories, do hereby accept the hospitality of Queen Seraphine. I enter her lands unarmed and as a guest. I will submit to her laws and her judgment while under her roof. By the old blood and the old ways, I so swear. The air itself seemed to shimmer, and Faye felt the oath settle into place like a physical weight. Passage is granted, the guard said. The gates swung open. They walked through into the southern territories, and immediately Faye felt the difference. Where Yaroslav's lands had been cold and austere, all stone and snow, Seraphine's realm was lush and warm. Gardens spilled over walls, and the air smelled of flowers even in late autumn. They were escorted by guards to a palace that made Yaroslav's northern fortress look modest. Everything was marble and gold, with fountains and statues and windows that soared 3 stories high. And waiting in the throne room was Queen Seraphine herself. She was beautiful in the way ancient things are beautiful, perfect and cold and utterly inhuman. Her white hair fell in elaborate braids down her back, woven with rubies, and her dress was the color of fresh blood. When she smiled at Yaroslav, it was the smile of a predator. Yaroslav, she said, how delightful that you've come all this way to visit. Your Majesty, Yaroslav said, bowing exactly as protocol demanded. Faye saw how much it cost him, this show of deference to an enemy. I bring Miss Faye Calloway, who carries testimony regarding the 400 human wards held in your hall. Yes, I received word of this absurd petition, Seraphine said. She descended from her throne with languid grace. You've wasted a journey, I'm afraid. Those wards are lawfully held under the tithe system. I have no intention of releasing them. The tithe system requires that wards be held only for specific crimes or debts, Faye said, stepping forward. I have documented testimony showing that 287 of your wards were taken for debts that have been paid in full, sometimes multiple times over. Another 93 were taken as children for their parents' crimes and have now served triple the lawful term. The remaining 20 are being held without any documentation of debt or crime at all. Seraphine's eyes fixed on Faye, and they were the color of amber, old and hard. You're very bold for a human. I'm an interpreter and legal scholar, Faye said. I'm simply stating facts. Facts, Seraphine repeated. How tedious. She walked in a circle around Faye, examining her like an interesting insect. Tell me, little scholar, what makes you think I care about your facts? I am 1,000 years old. I have held these lands since before your great-great-grandmother was born. I make the laws here. The compact between the vampire courts supersedes individual rule, Faye said. It was established precisely to prevent this kind of abuse. Abuse? Seraphine's voice went sharp. I have fed those wards, housed them, kept them safe for decades. If anything, they owe me for my generosity. Generosity would mean they could leave, Faye said. What you're describing is captivity. Seraphine's hand moved faster than human eyes could track, and suddenly she had Faye by the throat, lifting her off the ground. You will not lecture me in my own hall. Release her! Yaroslav's voice cut through the room like a blade. Or what? Seraphine asked pleasantly, still holding Faye. You're under oath of hospitality. You can't harm me or my people. You're helpless. Release her, Yaroslav repeated, or I will break my oath and damn the consequences. If you break an oath of hospitality, it will destroy your reputation, Seraphine said. Every court will know you as an oath breaker. You'll lose all credibility, all authority. Your own people will turn against you. I don't care, Yaroslav said, and his mercury eyes were blazing. Release her now. Seraphine studied him for a long moment. Then she laughed and dropped Faye, who caught herself on a pillar, gasping. Oh, this is delicious. You love her. The great Yaroslav Gravori, who has spent 800 years alone, has finally fallen for a mortal human. She clapped her hands together. How wonderfully tragic. Will you hear the testimony or not? Yaroslav asked through gritted teeth. Oh, I'll hear it, Seraphine said, but not because of your laws or your precious compact. I'll hear it because I'm curious to see how this plays out. She gestured to her guards. Bring the wards to the great hall, all 400 of them, and summon my court. If we're going to have testimony, we might as well make it entertaining. An hour later, Faye stood before an assembled court of vampires, all of them dripping with jewels and malice, and began to read the testimony she'd spent 3 months collecting. She spoke of Maria, taken at 19 and now 67, who had never seen her family again. She described Thomas and James, brothers separated for 40 years. She told the story of little Rosie, born in captivity, who drew pictures of sunshine because she'd never been allowed to play outside. As she spoke, Faye watched the wards themselves, assembled in the back of the hall. They looked thin and tired, dressed in servants' clothes, but their eyes were bright with hope. When she finished, Seraphine stood. A moving performance, she said. But it changes nothing. These wards were taken under lawful tithe. I am within my rights to keep them. Then I challenge the law itself, Yaroslav said. He stepped forward, and every eye in the hall turned to him. The tithe system was established 3,000 years ago as a way to handle criminals and genuine debts. It has become a mechanism for slavery. I propose we abolish it entirely and establish a new system based on consent and fair compensation. The hall erupted in protests. Vampires shouted over each other, arguing about tradition and necessity and the natural order. Seraphine raised a hand, and silence fell. That, she said, would require unanimous consent from all the major courts. You know that will never happen. Then I propose a compromise, Faye said. Her voice shook, but she forced herself to continue. Release these 400 wards specifically. Acknowledge that they've been held beyond lawful terms. In exchange, the tithe system continues for genuine debts, but with new oversight. Every ward must have documented cause, a fixed term, and regular review. Seraphine tilted her head. And who would enforce this oversight? A council, Yaroslav said. Representatives from each major court, plus human advocates. Humans, Seraphine said with distaste, sitting in judgment over vampire law. Humans are the ones being held, Faye pointed out. They deserve representation. The hall fell silent. Faye could see vampires calculating, weighing the costs and benefits. Finally, an elderly vampire near the front spoke up. "The girl makes a valid point," he said. "The tithe system has grown corrupt. Some oversight might actually benefit us, prevent the kind of abuses that lead to human rebellions." "And the precedent of releasing these wards?" another vampire asked. "Could be framed as an act of mercy," Yaroslav said. "A demonstration that the vampire courts value justice over tradition." Seraphine was very still, and Faye could practically see her thinking. Finally, she spoke. "I will agree to your compromise on one condition." "Name it," Yaroslav said. "The human girl stays," Seraphine said. "As collateral, to ensure you keep your end of the bargain regarding this oversight council." "No," Yaroslav said immediately. "Those are my terms," Seraphine said. "Release the 400 wards, establish your council, but Miss Calloway remains here for 1 year to ensure compliance. After that, she may leave freely." "Absolutely not, Your Majesty," Faye said quietly. "It's all right." Yaroslav turned to her, and the anguish on his face broke her heart. "Faye, I won't leave you here." "It's 1 year," Faye said. "And it frees 400 people. That's worth it." "Not to me." Faye took his hands. The entire court was watching, but she didn't care. "You once told me that precedent matters, that changing the world requires sacrifice. This is my sacrifice. Let me make it. I can't lose you." "You won't," Faye said. "It's 1 year, and then I'll come home." Yaroslav looked like he wanted to argue, to rage, to burn the whole hall down. But finally he nodded. 1 year, and Seraphine, if any harm comes to her, I will destroy you and every member of your court. Oath of hospitality be damned." "She'll be treated as an honored guest," Seraphine said. "You have my word." And so it was decided. The 400 wards were released the next morning, walking out of Seraphine's hall in a long, joyful line. Faye stood with Yaroslav watching them go, knowing she couldn't join them. "I'll come back for you," Yaroslav said. He held her so tightly she could barely breathe. "The moment the year is up, I'll be here." "I know," Faye said. "And I'll be waiting." He kissed her then, in front of Seraphine and her entire court, a kiss that tasted like grief and promise and desperate love. When he finally pulled away, there were tears on his face. "I love you," he said, "more than anything in 800 years. "I love you too," Faye whispered. "Now go, before I lose my courage." She watched him walk away, watched him join the freed wards and disappear down the southern road. And then she turned to face Queen Seraphine and the long year ahead. But the year was not as terrible as she'd feared. Seraphine kept her word about treating Faye as an honored guest. She was given beautiful rooms, access to the palace library, and the freedom to move about the grounds. She spent her days helping the remaining wards, teaching them to read and write, documenting their stories for when the Oversight Council was established. And every week, Yaroslav sent letters. Long, detailed letters about the progress of the council, about Victor's trial and conviction for conspiracy, about the changes happening in the northern territories. He wrote about missing her, about counting the days until they could be together again. Faye wrote back just as faithfully, telling him about her work, about the small victories she was winning for the wards who remained, about the ways Seraphine's court was slowly, grudgingly beginning to change. The year passed both slowly and quickly, and finally the morning came when Faye woke to find Seraphine herself in her room. "Your year is complete," the Queen said. "You're free to go." Faye packed her few belongings, said goodbye to the friends she'd made among the wards and even some of the vampires, and walked to the palace gates. And there, waiting exactly where he'd left her a year ago, was Yaroslav. He looked the same. White hair, mercury eyes, dressed in black and silver. But when he saw her, his face transformed with joy. Faye ran to him and he caught her, lifting her off the ground and spinning her around. "You came back," she said, laughing and crying at once. "I promised," Yaroslav said, "and I always keep my promises." They rode north together, and this time the 7 crossings were easy. The white bridge guard waved them through. Katerina at Harrow Gate let them pass without lighting the fires. The bandits in Thornwood called out greetings. Lady Nix at Deepwater Ford simply smiled and gestured them across. Lord Cassius welcomed them to the Blood Summit as honored allies. The borders were changing, becoming places of passage instead of death, and it was because of what they had started. When they finally reached Yaroslav's palace, he led Faye to a private chamber she'd never seen before. It was simple compared to the rest of the palace, with windows that overlooked the mountains and a fireplace already lit against the evening chill. "This is your room," he said, "if you want it, or you could stay with me, or anywhere else in the palace. I just wanted you to have a choice." "I choose you," Faye said. "I've always chosen you." Yaroslav pulled her close. "I need to ask you something." "I know what you're going to ask," Faye said. "And yes, you don't know what you're going to ask if I still want to be turned," Faye said. "If I still want forever with you. And yes, Yaroslav, I do. I want all of it." He rested his forehead against hers. "It will hurt. The turning is agonizing. I know. You'll lose your humanity, your warmth, your heartbeat, your ability to have children. I know. You'll outlive everyone you've ever known." "Except you," Faye said. "I won't outlive you." Yaroslav's breath caught. "Are you certain?" "I've never been more certain of anything," Faye said. "Turn me. Make me yours forever." He kissed her then, deep and desperate and full of 800 years of loneliness finally ending. And when he pulled back, his eyes had gone dark with hunger and love combined. "Tonight," he said, "if you're ready, I'm ready." The turning was everything he'd warned and more. Pain like fire in her veins, her heartbeat slowing and stopping, the world going dark and then blazingly bright. She felt herself dying and being reborn in the same terrible, beautiful moment, and through it all, Yaroslav held her, whispering words of love and encouragement, until finally, the pain receded. Faye opened her eyes to a world transformed. She could hear sounds miles away, see colors she'd never known existed, feel the texture of air against her skin. And when she looked at Yaroslav, she saw him with new eyes, not just beautiful, but radiant, every detail sharp and perfect. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Alive," Faye said, and then laughed at the irony. "More alive than I've ever been." He kissed her, and this time there was no holding back, no human fragility to account for. They came together with the passion of 2 people who'd fought for this moment, who'd crossed 7 deadly borders and changed the world to be together. And in the weeks and months that followed, they built something beautiful. The Oversight Council met for the first time, with Faye serving as one of the human advocates. They drafted the Traveler's Charter, opening all 7 crossings to lawful passage. They worked with the freed wards to create programs for helping those still held in other courts. The first lawful caravan crossed the whole line of borders 6 months after Faye's turning. She and Yaroslav stood at the White Bridge and watched the freed wards walk past, heading home to families they hadn't seen in decades, carrying hope and the promise of a better future. "We did it," Faye said, her hand in Yaroslav's. "You did it," he corrected. "I just walked you through the borders." "We did it together," Faye said firmly, "and we're going to keep doing it, keep changing things. Keep making the world better." Yaroslav pulled her close, and she could feel his smile against her hair. "Forever sounds like exactly enough time." They stood together as the sun set and the caravans passed, 2 immortals who had found each other across 800 years of loneliness, and they watched the world change into something kinder, 1 border crossing at a time. The road that had once meant death now meant hope, and every traveler who passed through safely was a testament to what they had built together. In the years that followed, Faye and Yaroslav became legends. The vampire king who walked his human love through 7 deadly borders became a story told at firesides, a tale of courage and devotion that inspired others to fight for change. The traveler's charter spread to other territories, then to other regions entirely. The tithe system was reformed, then eventually abolished. The Oversight Council grew into a permanent institution, with representatives from every court and every human settlement. And through it all, Faye and Yaroslav worked side by side, ruling with wisdom and compassion, never forgetting the journey that had brought them together. They were no longer king and interpreter, vampire and human. They were partners, equals, bound by love and purpose and the memory of 7 crossings that had changed everything. On quiet evenings they would walk together through the palace gardens, and Yaroslav would ask Faye to tell him about the journey again, about each crossing and what they'd learned. The White Bridge taught us that authority means nothing without the courage to use it justly, Faye would say. Harrowgate showed us that even the most hardened hearts can remember honor. Silverpike reminded us to trust each other. Thornwood proved that words can be as powerful as weapons. Deepwater Ford taught us the cost of sacrifice. The Blood Summit showed us that enemies can become allies, and the final crossing into Seraphine's lands taught us that sometimes the bravest thing is to be vulnerable. And Yaroslav would hold her close and say, "You taught me all of that. You taught me how to be more than just a king. You taught me how to be good." They ruled together for centuries, and their love became the foundation of a new era. The borders that had once been walls became bridges. The laws that had enslaved became protections. And the world, slowly but surely, became a place where no one had to cross enemy lands alone, because love and justice had made all lands safe for those brave enough to walk them. In the end, that was their legacy. Not just the laws they changed or the borders they opened, but the simple, radical idea that kindness mattered more than power, that love could cross any divide, and that sometimes the most revolutionary act was choosing to walk through hell with someone, holding their hand the whole way through.